Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of 22 Minutes. I am Jason Bates, and I'm going to bring you the lender side of things. He is Stephen Cotton. He's going to bring us the realtor side of things. How many people in the steeple?
Right. There's two.
We hope to not only entertain you, but also bring you some valuable content that you can actually use when you're looking to buy, sell, refinance, or invest in property. So thank you for tuning in. That's what this show is all about. It's about real estate. We do this Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. Arizona time. So be sure to set your alarm clocks. But an easier way to do that is to just head over and like our page. And when you like it, it'll notify you that we're live. There you go. There's your alarm clock. Facebook has got that built in. Cool technology.
Smart.
They're smart over there. My goodness. So with that, today is Trending Tuesday. This is October 24th, 2017.
Ooh, 19 something. Wow.
I know, I almost said 1917, didn't I? Oh. That takes me back.
That takes us all back to before Facebook. It was MySpace back then.
Yeah, MySpace. Exactly. Hey, we always do a tweet quote of the day, so I've got one for you today. We're going to cover some of the trends today. This is Trending Tuesday. We always do some of the trends that are happening in real estate, but before we do that, we always do a tweet quote of the day, so let's get to it. All right, today's tweet quote of the day: don't overthink it. Just let it go and take a step forward.
Yeah.
Kind of dive in, right? Don't put your toes in the water. Dive in.
Yep.
All right, that's what we did for the show. We just dove in and started doing it. If you watch our earlier shows,
yes,
kind of, yeah, not as good as they are now. At least we don't think they're as good as they are now. I guess that's debatable.
What we said, yeah, I bet you what we said was pretty good, but the production value is pretty.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever watch those.
That'll be a comedy show someday, I suppose. We'll sit back and laugh at that when we're drinking beers on the front porch.
Okay. Remember that time?
Remember back in 1917? Or
I remember
2017?
Right, our Halloween episode when you wore that mask. It scared me.
Exactly. All right. Hey, we're going to cover some of the trends. This is going to be kind of an interesting one here because I get asked this all the time, and I'm sure Stefan gets asked this too. So let's get to it. All right. I don't know if I need that music. Should I turn it down? Is it good?
Down if you want. I'm kind of digging it.
All right, you're digging it. All right, we'll keep with it. All right, this is Trending Tuesday, as I said before. We're going to cover some of the trends here. I'm on the wrong slide. We're going to get to this slide here first. Today, we're going to cover typical closing costs, what typical closing costs are, and how they affect the APR. So, there's always this confusion here, and I get asked this all the time. What are your closing costs? What are your closing costs? What are your closing costs? And Stefan, you probably get that asked, I'm sure too, right?
All the time. Yeah.
From buyers or sellers, even for that matter.
Right.
Closing costs, and Stefan and I were talking about this last night. There seems to be some differences between lenders in what closing costs are. Not that closing costs are different between lenders, of course, but the definition of closing costs is also different. And so that's what I want to try to cover today. And there's closing costs, and then there's prepaid items. And then you have certain out-of-pocket expenses that you have as well. And some lenders like to define closing costs as just their lender fees, if you will. So maybe underwriting, processing, that sort of thing. And then they say, okay, well, all the other closing costs are third-party fees. Fees being the key word there.
Right.
It's still a closing cost. The bottom line, it's still a closing cost, right?
Well, that's why they can come in and say, hey, all of our closing costs are, whatever, 1,500, 1,800, whatever their number is.
Yeah.
And then when their closing costs are higher, oh, no, those aren't ours. Those are third-party fees.
Yeah,
Well, I didn't prepare for it because you told me I needed this. Yeah.
And some lenders even say, okay, well, the closing costs for the third-party fees are universal. Whether you use me or you use somebody else, given this loan, your fees are going to be equal. And to some degree, that's actually a true statement, right?
Yep.
So that doesn't really affect a lot of things. But I want to cover just closing costs. What are typical closing costs? So no matter what lender you talk to, what are your closing costs and how do they affect the APR, right? So closing costs. In Arizona, we use kind of a rule of thumb here in Arizona. This may vary throughout the country, but in Arizona, on an FHA loan, it's typically around 3%.
Yeah. I do and I sent you that text last night, 3221, or I might have sent a buyer 3221, 3 for FHA. Typically, 2 for conventional, and then another 2 for VA. If you're doing a VA loan, and then 1% for cash. So 1% for cash is pretty much title fees and the prepaids. Wow.
Right. So what is that? That's 3% of the sales price, or I should say, it's actually probably closer, depending on your loan amount, probably closer to 3% of your loan amount, not the sales price. But everybody uses kind of sales price because we just automatically assume most people put 3.5% down, so they're fairly close to one another. But with people putting 20% down on a property, you know, it might be on a conventional loan, it might be 2%. Now, this varies, and it's very critical that everybody kind of gets this portion of it because closing costs are partially dependent upon the loan amount. So when a loan amount is $50,000 as an example, well, the closing costs aren't going to be 3% of $50,000 or 2%, as Stefan outlined. It's going to be higher, you know.
Right, because there's flat fees associated.
Yeah, because the flat fees are associated with it. Now, when it comes to $1 million property, it's not going to be 3% of that either. It's going to be less than that. So, for $1 million,
maybe less than $30,000.
Yeah. Right. So, but on average, given an average sales price here in Maricopa County, it's about 3-2-1 is a pretty good estimate for closing costs. Now, of the closing costs, there are fees that impact the APR, annual percentage rate. And so I'm going to put a chart up here in just a second, but I want to read this definition of prepaid finance charges because this is, I'm in the industry and it's even confusing to me. Okay, that's why I got this chart here. So I'm going to read this here. Prepaid finance charges per the Federal Reserve Board are cost of consumer credit as a dollar amount. And that's not too confusing, although it is kind of confusing. So break it down for us, right? It includes any charge payable directly or indirectly by the consumer and imposed directly or indirectly by the creditor as an incident to or a condition of the extension of credit. What?
No, I actually zoned out really like after the fourth word. Say it again. Say it again. I really did. And I feel bad.
This is like, what are you like? Is this that boring or what?
Yeah, it was just start over. Yeah, just do it again because that was weird. Yeah, I really did zone out.
Did I hypnotize you or something? Did I just like?
No idea what you said.
Okay. It includes any charge payable directly or indirectly by the consumer and imposed directly or indirectly by the creditor as an incident to or a condition of extension of credit.
Okay.
You get it.
I got most of it. I do now.
All right. It's kind of confusing, I know. It does not include... Okay, it goes on to say here.
I was going to say focus on the last 3 words of that last sentence they said.
Condition of credit? Or extension of credit?
Extension. So that's what that is, extension of credit. Then the rest of the stuff is the stuff.
Yeah. All prepaid finance charge directly affect the APR, annual percentage rate, on a mortgage loan, whereas the rest of the closing costs do not. All prepaid finance charges are closing costs, but not all closing costs are prepaid finance charges.
Right.
Okay, so prepaid finance charges, in a nutshell, affect your APR. So what are prepaid finance charges? Well, let's kind of put up a chart here for us here, and I kind of got this, and I'll zoom in on it here so we can see it here.
Yes.
So you can see these, and this is, not all of these charges are applicable here in Arizona, of course, but some of them may be applicable where you live. So the big ones here are the private mortgage insurance renewals. That's a big one, especially on FHA, or if you're putting less than 20% down on a mortgage. You're going to have private mortgage insurance. That is an APR effective fee. Okay, and it does affect the APR dramatically. Now, one thing to kind of note here, the APR in a mortgage loan is always going to be higher than your note rate, your note interest rate, okay, because these fees impact it. Okay, administrative fees, escrow fees when you have an escrow account, or not an escrow account, excuse me, escrow for closing, that's an APR impacting fee as well.
Yeah, I see the application fee itself, like the application fee, not for the appraisal or the credit limit. That affects your APR. I mean, what's an application fee? $50? I don't even know.
Some lenders charge it, some don't. It's kind of one of those things where, you know, some do, some don't, kind of thing. If they don't charge it an application fee, they charge it somewhere else. It's all one of the same. It's kind of a little bit of a smoke and mirrors when it comes to that, quite honestly. So some lenders may have an underwriting fee that may only be $300, where another underwriter fee might be $800. But the one who has $300 as an underwriting fee may have an application fee of $500.
Yeah.
Right. So they all equal about the same, at least the ones that I've seen. So they just kind of rearrange it a little bit.
So instead of spending $500 financing it over 30 years, is there a way that somebody could just like prepay that?
You could prepay these items. Sure. You could prepay them up front as part of your deal. And then your APR would be equal to your note rate.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing.
So we're going to talk about, for those that are just joining us, we're talking about the APR and how some of these fees affect it. But you could prepay it, and that's what we're going to go over today is what is the loan cost, like what is the cost to do the stuff. We're going to be able to go through this stuff and see if you can make a smarter choice on, all right, I got another $1,000. Let me prepay some of this stuff instead of financing it. Right.
Yeah, you can. Now, most people are pretty tight budget-wise anyway because of housing affordability and that sort of thing. But certainly, you could pay these things. Now, like you mentioned on cash. Well, cash deals, a lot of these fees go away, right, on a cash deal. So therefore, the APR is more in line. There is no APR, right? Because it's cash. Yeah, because it's a cash deal. So a lot of these fees go away. But as far as the typical buyer, this is why on when you are negotiating a sales price for a consumer, you will a lot of times ask for closing costs to be included or the seller to pay closing costs. Right. It's almost become the norm, really.
Right.
Almost, not quite. But 90% of the contracts I see come across my desk have the seller paid closing costs or seller concessions involved.
Try to get those in there.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. What do you think?
You know, like when there's no supply, like we're in right now, it's hard to get them covered. So you either have to raise the price to something you're above comfort level at. So if you want to pay $225 for a house, you might have to go up to $229 or $230,
right?
To get those closing costs covered. But then again, now you're financing all your closing costs for 30 years to get them covered. Does that make sense to everybody else? Because right, I'm putting it over to the side, having the seller do it, but the seller's only going to cover it if I come up that much more.
Right.
Most of the time, not all the time, but sometimes they just say, yeah, okay.
Now, I want to give another option to consumers out there because we kind of did this here with a buyer that we're working on right now. Yep. And that is closing costs can be paid by either the seller, yourself, the buyer, or the lender can cover your closing costs. So you're always going to have closing costs. And I want to kind of preface this a little bit. You're always going to have closing costs. And again, they're equal to about 3% of your loan amount or sales price. That includes appraisal, that includes inspections, that includes everything. All prepaid items, the whole ball of wax, if you will. That's how I define closing costs. What does it cost me to get into this loan, right? So it's about 3%. And if you add in the mortgage insurance premium, it's probably more or less 4%, but that's financed into the loan. So, you know, I'm not going to necessarily count that, but it is considered a closing cost. So with that being said, a lot of lenders, I've seen a lot of lenders actually take the step and saying, hey, we got no closing cost loan. Come refinance with us or come do this with us. And, you know, it's cheaper. It's cheap. Okay. Well, Not really. The closing costs are real. They're there. Title companies don't give away their services for free. Appraisers certainly don't give their services away for free. Maricopa County Recorder's Office does not give their service away for free. So what happens is the lender pays the closing costs on your behalf. How do they do that? Well, they increase the interest rate to create a premium or a spread between what the par interest rate is, the lowest interest rate possible, versus a higher interest rate. They take that money, that spread, and they pay the closing costs on your behalf.
Yep.
That's how they do it. That's a no closing cost loan. You're never going to get the best interest rate on a no closing cost loan. I've got a no closing cost loan, but you have to be willing to sacrifice the rate in order to get it. Now, this is a good option. Huh?
You have a VA loan. I have a VA loan.
Yeah.
Is that what you did, like the no cost VA refi, or?
No, I always paid my closing costs because I wanted the lower interest rate because I know it's going to stay in the home longer. But that option is really good for investors. Investors who, say I'm going to be in the house, 2 years, year and a half, whatever. I'm going to get a renter in there, let it build some equity, and then I'm going to turn around and sell it. So they're not really concerned about, recouping. 30-year lowest interest rate. They're concerned about, hey, I want to keep as much money in my pocket up front so I can reinvest it somewhere else. I don't have to pay these closing costs out of my pocket, kind of thing. And so they'll elect to take that avenue. But for the consumer who's going to be in the house a long time, well, they probably want the lower interest rate. Especially when the seller is paying closing costs in a lot of cases. Take the best interest rate that you can. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
So again, just to kind of recap, closing costs are, what I disclose to clients are all costs associated with obtaining that house or the loan to get that house. So again, it includes out-of-pocket expenses, appraisal, HOA, upfront fees, home inspection, everything. That's what I consider to be home warranty. Yes. Yeah. All those things are considered closing costs in my eyes. Don't let a lender fool you by saying, oh, my closing costs are $1,300. Well, okay, that's your lender fees. And you're going to see this on a loan estimate too. You get a loan estimate up front. Problem is right now, a lot of lenders aren't giving fees, which understandably so, don't want to give out fees until you're under contract. So it's really hard for the consumer to get an accurate picture as to what their costs may be or what they anticipate them to be. Because a lot of lenders are reluctant to do that, because once we commit to fees to you, well, and you have it in writing, yeah, you could hold us to the fire about that and say, hey, these are the fees. And then we end up paying money for you to obtain a mortgage, which that'll put us out of business. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 for a lender. It's a little slippery slope for us to quote fees up front.
Or let's just say your fees were $1,800. Right? Okay, here's a fee. Now they can go shop it around to 3 other people who have a different definition of what the fees are.
True. You could ask your lender, what are your lender fees? What are your total lender fees? And then shop the different lenders per their lender fees. Because again, all the other fees are going to be pretty much universal.
Right.
Tell
somebody the only zero lending fee, then cost you half a point, right? Cost you $50 a month.
Right. When I say pretty much too, some lenders have differences in rate too. So, their rate may be at a cost where my rate may not be at a cost. And that is then an added fee there. But as far as lender fees go, underwriting processing fee, if an application fee, credit report fee, if they charge additional credit report fee, whatever, those are the fees that you're going to be looking at as far as lender costs go. And you certainly could compare those pretty easily.
I guess the other thing I see the question on is you said that there's different fees or different rates that they can offer. Is that because of better ratings? Like the stronger lender has a better interest rate, or is it just because of their infrastructure inside?
Okay, rate is a complicated thing to try to define. So I'll try to simplify it here. So some lenders have good ratings with the government, and as a result, the government gives them better premiums. Other lenders they didn't use prudent underwriting. Maybe they have some fines, that sort of thing. That's at the base of lending. Then you add another layer to that. Some lenders like to have expensive buildings. They like to pay their executives a lot of money. They like to do a lot of different things that cost money. Therefore, that's a pass down into the rate, and so they adjust the rate to cover those costs. Some lenders like to pay their loan officers a lot of money, and so therefore they pass that down through the rate.
They pass the savings on to you? No, they pass the cost on you.
They pass the cost. The other thing too, there's loan level pricing adjustments to a loan. Some lenders interpret risk a little bit differently. So some lenders with borrowers that have low FICOs will have an added pad to the rate for that low FICO. Fannie Mae has loan level pricing adjustments, and then lenders will add to that because they want to make sure that if they have to absorb that file for whatever reason because of the interpretation of risk, this is what we're talking about on Monday's CFPB thing, the interpretation is a little bit different. So some lenders will take that padding and say, hey, you know what? If we have to take this loan on, at least we can recoup some of our losses by this extra padding. So it's a little bit of padding on their side too. So it's a little bit of a challenge to define the differences in rate because different people have different hedging that they do with the rates and different interpretations of risks in the market, and that all trickles down in through the rate. Different spending habits, different credit capitalization requirements for different lenders. This all comes down in through the interest rate and quoted interest rate. Some of the local brokers like to say, well, I have no overhead, and I got the best rate. And I see this all the time with loan officers, and then they pay their loan officers a lot of money. Well, then the loan officers have to expense everything. Like there was a couple companies I was with that I had to pay for my own credit reports. I had to pay for my own marketing material. I had to pay for everything. Yet I'm a W-2'd employee. It's like, this is the most backwards thing I've ever seen in my life. You try to make me a realtor and say you got the best rates, and you pay me more money, but after my expenses, I end up making the same amount of money that I would if a company did everything, and yet I can still have the same kind of interest rate. It's like, it's kind of a smoke and mirrors kind of thing, I guess, in the lending world, which doesn't really affect the consumer, I suppose, but it's one of those things.
But now they're in the know.
Yeah, there's a little insider information there. All right, hey, we're out of time on today's show. Hopefully that cleared up the muddy waters as far as fees and APR. I don't like to quote specific rates, of course. We're not going to do that here on the show, or APRs, but there are certain fees that do affect the APR. So big takeaway on this show, Stefan rightly pointed out, you can compare lender fees against other lender fees. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of who's going to have the cheaper overall closing costs. If that's what you're. I wish
you could say, okay, Mr. Lender, for you, Mr. Bates.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm buying a house at $225. Can I see your last 2 or 3 settlement sheets? You cross out the names or the street address or whatever. Just show me with those fees. I wish you could do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, again, I could do that.
It's a great change.
Yeah, I could do that. However, then I could be held liable to those fees. And if things change, even if, like, as an example, even if, let's say we had an appraisal done and I didn't disclose necessarily that there was a reinspection required. Now, I could do a change of circumstance, is what we call it, and redisclose that fee or whatever. But some lenders like to disclose that up front. It's like, hey, there could potentially be an appraisal, additional appraisal fee kind of thing. Well, if I didn't do that, then I'd be held liable and I have to pay for that appraiser to go back out there. There's just a lot of exposure, a lot of liability to a lender. It doesn't sound like much on an individual basis, but when you're doing it as a company, it can certainly add up very, very quickly. I can tell you credit reports, as an example. Credit reports or costs are about, anywhere real true costs are probably $25 for the actual credit report. But then when you run it through Fannie Mae's website, they charge, I think it's like $2 to $5 every time you run it through. to get the automated approval. And then if you need to do any type of credit repair or credit, fixing or something like that, that is another cost. That's generally $30 per trade line per bureau. So if you're doing it all 3 bureaus, that's $90 for one trade line, right? That can add up very quickly. Well, those costs cannot be passed on to the consumer. Those are costs that the lender has to absorb. So what you'll see is a credit report, as an example, a credit report fee of $50. Well, the actual credit report is actually $25. But if we have to do all these other things, run it through Fannie Mae and all this sort of stuff, well, we gotta cover that cost too. It's right. Too I don't want to say minuscule, but you don't want to put $1 on a loan estimate. Hey, this is charges $1. It seems nitpicky, right? So what they do is they just kind of lump it all into the credit report because it's all associated with the credit report, because you need the credit report in order to run the DU findings or the Fannie Mae findings, and there is a possibility, potential that you need credit restoration too on certain things to get different credit scores. So very complicated stuff. It's very complicated, man. It is super complicated. Talk about the tax code and the loopholes within the tax code. Mortgage lending is pretty complicated. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and that's why you have these different interpretations and these different, angles to lend. That's why you have these different approaches from different lenders, and there's variances between those lenders as a result.
I think Avril Lavigne said it best when she said, "Why do you have to go and make things so complicated?"
What was the gentleman? The LA Dodgers are in the World Series or whatever, but Rodney King or whatever. Why can't we all just get along?
Right.
I wish that we all could get along in the mortgage thing and just have it more simplified. I really wish it could be simplified. They tried to do that with Dodd-Frank. It didn't work. It's still complicated. But to the consumer, we try to make it as transparent as possible. At least I try to anyway. All right, everyone, thanks for being a part of the show and sticking with us. If you stuck with us through the entire episode, really do appreciate that. Thank you for watching and supporting the show. No comments today, which is a little bit of a bummer, but that's all right. Please share with your friends and family. If you're looking to buy, sell, refinance, or invest in property, we want to be your team of choice. So please reach out to us. Yes. Like our page if you would. We've kind of calmed down on the likes on our page. I don't know if we've hit this plateau. We need to get going on that a little bit more. I'd like to get to 2,000 likes on this page.
Well, I think what happens is the people that like us.
Yeah.
We're doing the show for the other people that aren't liking us. But
yeah, maybe so.
We got a little over 1,000 people following.
Yeah. With that, hey, we're going to go ahead and wrap today's show up. We went a little long today, so do apologize about that. But be sure to see us tomorrow, or be around tomorrow, or come to our Facebook page tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. as we do Wacky Wednesday. Until then, everyone have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.